A problem on my plate might be on yours too. How do we enter into Holy Week when life is freaking busy? For example, today's Holy Thursday. Mass starts at 5:30. I've got a business analytics exam at 7. What am I going to be thinking about during Mass? Hopefully Jesus, but we'll see. What can I do to enter into Holy Week in the midst of the craziness that is life? Happy Thursday, everybody. It's Ptony, your friendly Catholic vlogger. Once upon a time, I was in preschool and I was spoiled. Oh, I miss those days. Holy Week was my favorite because everything else in our lives stopped and we pulled out all the bells and whistles. Well, actually, it's Holy Week, so we stop with the bells. They're in the Triduum, right? Like, that's liturgical. But I was in a religious community, and as a religious community, we did a lot of extra work to create an environment of prayer, of accompanying Jesus in these moments. Things like an altar of repose, extended times of silence, singing Gregorian chant. This was all easy peasy stuff for us to make happen. I'm no longer in priest school. Now I'm just, one of the secular people where life doesn't stop for Holy Week. I remember how blown away I was by the experience of Holy Week in priest school. Things like, adoration at ungodly hours, except they're godly because, God was there in adoration, right? Every moment of every day for those 3 days directly pointed us to reflect on God and how much he loves us and how he died for us. And asked us a question: how can we accompany Jesus? Good Friday was a day of silence. All we would do that day is pray. And there was so much to pray about. It's Good Friday. Holy Saturday was a day of emptiness. There wasn't much on our plate. There was all this free time in our schedule, and in our community, we didn't really have much free time. So what were we supposed to do with all this free time? One idea that would come to mind a lot is, hey, I can go make a visit to the chapel. But of course, it's Holy Saturday. There is no Eucharist to go visit. And we felt how Jesus was missing. That was profound. Having opportunities above and beyond what we were used to go visit Jesus, and he wasn't there. That was just an impactful moment. And then came Easter Vigil Mass, where all of the liturgy has this great catharsis of the Lord is risen. And it was beautiful. It was incredible. We were all sleep deprived at this point, so, we're like, our emotions were primed to be tugged at. But it was amazing. And then get up the next morning and celebrate Easter as a community. Celebrate that the Lord is risen. The most amazing experience in my life. Can I say that? I might be able to say that, without exaggerating. I have tried to recreate that for myself since leaving preschool. But that's a pretty high bar to aim for, and I've never gotten there. In fact, usually Holy Week, it's busy. This is a busy time of year. This is spring, getting ready for summer, closing down the spring semester. We've got exams, we've got papers to write, we've got, life keeps on going on. And figuring out what are we going to do for summer. As a student, those are all things that I think about. So here, I'm a big believer in honoring legitimate responsibilities that are on our plates, wherever we are in our lives. My stage of life, right now, I'm a student. And so I think to honor God, it's good to honor these responsibilities that come with being a student, and to perform them well. So too for someone who has a job or who has a family or both. Honor the responsibilities that are on our plate. That holds true even during Holy Week. During Holy Week, I'll ask myself, hey, are there some responsibilities that I can push back a little bit to give me a little bit more space to enter into the liturgy? But that can feel like a losing battle, because I'll never really be able to push that much responsibility off my plate during Holy Week. And I need to simply come to grips with that, and embrace that. I should embrace the responsibilities that God has put on my plate during this time of life, and continue to embrace that during Holy Week. So back in preschool, I was sent to be a priest, right? That meant we had classes. One of the reflections that we bounced around inside our community quite often was the idea that we can make our desk into an altar, offer up our studies to God. Of course, that was more of a reflection for during study time, which wasn't Holy Week. But during Holy Week, when we're doing all of our normal responsibilities that we need to do, this is a special time when we can invite God into those moments in a special way. If I can't go to the Holy Week liturgy all the time, maybe I can bring God into my life a little bit more. Last Friday during Stations of the Cross, I was struck by that phrase. Jesus handed over his spirit. This is the phrase that we use to describe Jesus' death. But also, taking it in a different sense, can't that phrase describe Jesus' entire life? Jesus handed over his spirit to the Father every day of his life, from sunup to sundown and past sundown until the next sunup. And he did that in some very practical, simple ways. Of course, there's the grandiose ways that we hear about, that we talk about, right? He preached the gospel, he worked miracles, and, he's God. He also spent 30 years with Mary and Joseph in a hidden life, simply taking care of the little things that God put on his plate, honoring his father and his mother. And so Jesus handing over his spirit at the end of his life isn't something new that he did for the first time there. It's something that he did perfectly for his entire life. That's something that even in the midst of the busyness that I experienced during Holy Week itself, what a tragedy to be busy during Holy Week, but it's something that a lot of us do experience. That handing over of the Spirit is something that I can unite myself to Jesus in. I can hand my spirit over to God, saying, your will, not my will, be done. In these things that seem to pale in importance compared to what's going on at the church right now when I've got to be taking a business analytics exam. I think it's important to be honest with ourselves and to really ask, is there some special way that I can spend, let's say, an hour in prayer beyond what I normally would? Can I sacrifice a little sleep, perhaps? I can in my life. I don't know if you can. Y'all have your own lives to discern in. But I think it's important to not give ourselves a hard time for taking care of the responsibilities, the legitimate responsibilities that we need to take care of in our lives. Instead of giving ourselves a hard time for missing out on triduum stuff when we're taking care of things that we need to take care of. Why don't we take advantage of those things that we are doing to turn those into prayers? And very importantly, let's all pray for each other, because we are a community, we are a church, and we live out our faith not as individuals but as community. I forget that. I'm not good at that. But this Holy Week I'm going to be praying for you. Please pray for me too. All right, I've got some balloons in a bucket. What are the balloons in a bucket for? I don't know. Well, these represent my patrons, and I would like to give a shout out to Shoeless Joe. This balloon represents Shoeless Joe, who is one of my patrons on Patreon. Thank you so much, Shoeless Joe. You're the best. If you're watching this on a Holy Thursday, well, over there is a link to another video, but I would actually recommend not watching more YouTube right now, because Jesus is more important than my YouTube channel. But if it's not Holy Week anymore, these videos are great. We could hang out some more. Click on video, or you can support me on Patreon. There's a link. That's all I got. God bless and ciao.